Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the attack that took place in Swat on Saturday. We'll also talk about the American and Afghan pressure on Pakistan during this war on terror. We'll also talk about the Indian violations that are happening on a daily basis on the line of control and the use of Afghan soil against Pakistan. These are our two topics for discussion today. Both are interrelated. Let me introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today for this discussion, we have Ikram Bhatti Saab, and joining him we have Salman Bhittani. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Sir, 11 military personnel have lost their lives and several more have been injured in that suicide attack in Swat on Saturday. 5 years, sir, it was between attacks in Swat, and the military operation that was conducted in Swat was supposed to eliminate all such militant activity from the valley. But unfortunately, now we've seen a resurgence, and it has happened after Sufi Muhammad was released from jail. Do you see any connection between that, sir? And what is your opinion on this latest attack, sir?
Well, in my view, we have made very meaningful gains in our war against terror in Pakistan. The incidents or the number of incidents or the severity of incidents has drastically reduced. But this recent incident of Swat is a reminder to us that this war is not over. It goes on, and that the terrorists are continuing to find their facilitators and their helpers and their sympathizers within amongst us. And while we've had a major operation in Swat earlier on, and Swat has been peaceful for a rather long time, and maybe we have relaxed in our security arrangements, or the terrorists have been able to make an ingress, or both, and this incident has happened. And while we of course will investigate and strengthen our arrangements and find out as to where these people came from, who were they, and where all did they get their support from, the fact remains that the major responsibility lies on our intelligence and investigative agencies. And because the best protection or best defense against all such incidents is preemption, and preemption can only happen through intelligence. I mean, you have to be forewarned, only then you can forearm yourself. So major burden of responsibility lies on our intelligence and investigative agencies. We need to investigate as to how it happened, and make sure that at least the similar incident doesn't happen, or the similar methods are not used again. And once again, it's a stark reminder to the people of Pakistan, to the nation, that we have to keep our eyes and ears open. We have to look for these facilitators, these supporters, these sympathizers who are amongst us and who continue to support them, because without local support, no such incident can happen.
Right, so we'll come to the issue of these facilitators later on, but let's also talk about the situation in Afghanistan. We've seen a recent uptick of violence in Afghanistan. Over 200 people lost their lives in the span of a week. So Salman, do you see a connection between the activities that are taking place on both sides of the border across Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Definitely there is a connection. Both soils are at times used or misused. But we have seen that this time, though Afghan government has followed the same course of action, the same suit, just in a few hours they've blamed Pakistan.
But not all of them, Salman, to be fair.
Yes.
There are certain elements within the Afghan establishment or government that are blaming Pakistan, but a vast majority of people are now realizing that the situation is not as clear-cut and simple as it is being made out to be.
Since they have been following the same course of action for quite a lot of time, and now people of Afghanistan has understood that it's not only this rhetoric that they spell just to avert the pressure, but it's the weakness of their security agencies and security apparatus as well. I agree to that. But as far as the connection of using soil is concerned, there is an issue, because last week was very good, as in the Pak-Afghan delegates met each other, they discussed, And since the situation was very tense and the very unfortunate and sad incident took place in Kabul where 100 plus lives were lost, in the backdrop of that blast, these kind of initiatives were really good. But again, something happened. I think the game is quite complex. The quagmire has gone more complex than getting simpler. Though there are other players as well now who are trying to pacify the situation, who are trying to create an environment where peace would prevail, because you see China is a more proactive member now to this Afghan question. But at tactical level, Swat was a surprise, I think, and that too, it was not a civilian entity which was hit. A military entity was hit, and that too quite inside. So that's a surprise, and I agree to my colleague where he says that we might got relaxed because Swat was kind of cordoned off and very well protected and very well cleaned, and most of the concentration was on Waziristan or other areas, Rajgal and Khyber. So this might be a reason, but again, so the geographical contiguity of Swat is quite different with that from Bajod or Kuram or Waziristan. So hitting deeper in the main land, that's a worrisome scenario. And again, if it is connected to Afghanistan, that's again an issue, not at the level, at the ground level, but at political level as well, where last week Afghanistan and Pakistan's governments and establishments both, they take a leap forward, and they were like, despite the bad situation, despite that huge incident, they came and they met each other. Pakistani delegation also went back to Kabul. This was a very healthy sign. We have not seen this kind of diplomacy in the recent times, where both the sides have been talking about closing the borders, and both the sides have been really taken aback and standing towards some poles. But this time we were expecting, I mean, in Pakistan, students of international politics like us were expecting that Afghan government would really react very hard, and since it was a very huge incident, and whenever the death toll is 100 and above, we have also faced such kind of incidents and situations, and they are like watershed events. So this watershed event, instead of going too much against Pakistan, it brought both the parties to the table. Afghan NDS chief coming to Pakistan is a great big breakthrough, I think. And I would really appreciate the efforts of Afghan ambassador as well. He was very positive. I heard him at several conferences about Pakistan, Afghanistan peace. That step is kind of, I think, sabotaged by maybe a third force, maybe a force which is now not interested, maybe a regional or extra regional actor in this peace process, because this was some kind of a breakthrough for me.
Right. As far as we know, sir, that there are no more any militant hideouts, especially in Swat, and that shows that this suicide bomber who entered Swat probably from some other area, could be Bajor agency or could be the Kunar province from eastern Afghanistan. But we do know, sir, that the TTP does enjoy safe sanctuaries in Kunar, and there are reports that Maulana Fazlullah might be having a sanctuary in Kunar province. So when you mentioned earlier about the facilitation inside Pakistan, so that kind of lends more credence to this assumption that definitely somebody was supporting the suicide bomber in his activities. Now, you've also mentioned this, sir, that it's a worrisome phenomena, but then how would you, or what would you attribute this phenomena to? And exactly what can the government or the people do when we have to, see that there is a large number of people that are, maybe sympathetic towards the cause of the terrorists?
It used to be a very large number, not, and I wouldn't say large, it will be a very significant number that sympathized with the cause of the Taliban.
Well, how can this be addressed, sir?
And this essentially emanated from their religious sentiments. And I think the APS incident was a watershed incident which actually, for once and for all, convinced the Pakistani nation that it no longer is a religious activity. And from here on, it became easier for Pakistan to tackle all such sympathizers, and most of which understood themselves that it no longer is a religious activity and it is honest to goodness pure terrorism, and for motives other than spreading of Islam or Sharia. So that I think the job of the government became very easy. And you must have also seen that earlier in the past, whenever such heinous acts took place, Taliban chose to deny their involvement. And this sensitivity of the people of Pakistan actually played its role. And thereafter, I think whatever facilitation, support or sympathy that came out or became visible in Pakistan was essentially out of, I think, money. People were purchased for a particular amount, and maybe motivation out of revenge or out of such like sentiments, and no longer religion, I think, played little role in it. But then when you look at incidents like Safura Chaurangi, where very educated people got involved and they undertook such an action, that was, I think, a motivation on account of the plight of people in Libya, Iraq, Syria or Afghanistan. And when they found that the governments of these countries was unable to resist against the Americans or the Europeans, and they were easily manipulated, exploited by elements who wanted chaos and disorder in the region, and they played in their hands. And I think there could be an element of such nature also in the present day facilitators in Pakistan, besides being purchased. So I think it is now far easier for the investigation agencies, for the intelligence agencies and for the government to identify and of course prosecute all these supporters and facilitators. And of course the responsibility of the entire nation remains, that they have to keep your eyes and ears open, and they are basically the protectors of this land which belongs to them. And while we have the armed forces, we have the intelligence agencies, we have the security agencies, we have the investigation agencies, but at the end of the day, it is a war for every citizen of Pakistan. We all have to participate. Only then we will be able to defeat these elements.
And also the National Action Plan has to be put in proper implementation.
Certainly.
So that is a very important aspect to it as well. Well, Salman, when we talk about the relationship, we are now talking about increasing or improving cooperation and coordination between the governments of Afghanistan and Pakistan. How do you see that situation improving? How do you see the tense diplomatic situation that we've had to face vis-a-vis Afghanistan? How can that be improved? What sort of cooperation can we enter into with the Afghan authorities? Because every time when Afghanistan and Pakistan ties suffer, it is the militants who actually get benefit from that. So that needs to be addressed as well. How can we go about it?
I think we need to look into it retrospectively from a very practical lens, because there have been issues. First, there have been issues regarding even sitting across a table. So as I in my earlier analysis told you that this huge incident could not even prevent them, and they kind of came closer and talked to each other. So one step is kind of being taken. The other issue is that what I have learned from the body languages of both the governments and their representatives, that some of the issues are quite rigid about them. For example, Pakistan is adamant about building a wall and securing its border no matter what, because Pakistan actually thinks that this is a security issue and we need to take care of our security. We need to stop people from Afghanistan entering into our territory and then creating this havoc. This is the mindset in our case. But on the other side, it's totally opposite. They are agreed upon talking about intelligence sharing. They are agreed on any other cooperation mechanism, but they have not been convinced or agreed on this mechanism. They are not even interested to talk about it, because whenever we listen to their ambassadors or their representatives, they kind of brush away this issue, and they're like, we are not interested in creating walls and we are interested in integrating and all. I mean, at the moment, tactically speaking, on ground the situation demands something different measures. But if there are issues, then they need to be spelled out, they need to be discussed. If there is something regarding the issue of Pakhtunistan in their mind, they should come about it, and that should be discussed. If something related to the Durand Line settlement, that should also be discussed. I mean, in rhetorics and in cosmetics, that these issues should not be brushed away and left under the carpet, because there are some core problems which will, which are addressed, then you would come across some concrete institutional arrangements and solutions.
Right.
So, as far as the initialized breaking is concerned, that we witnessed. As far as the positive role of extra-regional actors or actors in the region, both China and Russia, that's also very positive. There is ambivalence about US stance about the Afghan question, whether they are interested in peace or not, whether they are interested in, because at one point of time they are bringing in more forces, at the other point of time they are talking about combating Taliban, and some of their second tier or third tier leaders is even talking about the importance of dialogue with Taliban. So at the same time, it's very difficult to think about it as in whether what are you interested in. You want to combat those people who are your opposite, you are fighting against them, you cannot sit with them on the table. These are two different issues. If you are talking to them, then you cannot fight them. If you are fighting them, then you cannot talk to them. So this is the crux of the matter. But as far as Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned, I think there is a rethink in Afghan mindset as well. Maybe because of the upcoming election, maybe because of the upcoming political change, and maybe because of the ground realities as well. Because out of these 4 attacks that have shocked Kabul in that week, 2 were claimed by ISIs. They were not claimed by Taliban. So that argument that Taliban have some sort of maybe support from any other part of the country or in the region, that also is not gaining that much space, because obviously now Afghans cannot say that ISIs are also being sponsored by maybe Pakistan or anybody else. So that's a new force in the offing, that's a new actor in the offing, and which is also creating headlines and good headlines. So that's why I think they have changed their mindset. They want to come to the table and they want to resolve these issues.
Very important, sir. And when we talk about those routes, which are used by militants to infiltrate into Pakistan from Afghanistan, those, sir, need to be monitored, I guess, more intensely. And also, sir, the refugee problem. Pakistan has tried repeatedly to send or repatriate the Afghan refugees back to their home country, but that has also run into problems, sir. So in your opinion, do you think that is a wise step in order to eject the Afghan refugees from Pakistan, although they have been getting repeated deadlines in their stay extension? But the whole idea, is it going to help in alleviating the situation on the borders, sir?
You see, refugees eventually and ultimately have to go back to their own country, and they are here as a humanitarian issue. And the fact remains that wherever you have a concentration of these refugees, the people from Afghanistan, whosoever infiltrates, can easily come and merge and blend into these refugees, take refuge, plan, orchestrate, and then maybe recuperate and then go back. And the security agencies or the intelligence agencies are really challenged by this phenomena. The city of Quetta has a population of a certain amount, out of which 30% are Afghan refugees. So we find that maximum number of terrorist incidents that happen anywhere else in the country in terms of territory are the highest in Quetta. So there is no rocket science to relate the two. So it is in the interest of peace that the refugees return to Afghanistan as early as possible. And unfortunately, not just the Afghan government, but the Americans are not keen on this, which clearly reflects their intention, their motive. Either they are not convinced of this logic, or they think that it is not in their interest.
But what's more important here, sir, is Pakistan's interest. And for the citizens of Pakistan, it is extremely important that these areas where the Afghan refugees are being used by the militants as decoys or as a place to hide, that has to be eliminated by the Pakistani establishment government. How can we go about doing that without actually upsetting the refugees and the population of Afghanistan?
I think the issue is very complex, far more complex than what we are thinking about it, because one, the status of refugee, it has something to do with international law. I mean, you cannot just throw them out like anything. Second, the intention of the country, the host country, as in Afghanistan, whether they intend to take them back or not. I don't think so. They are interested, because they have not taken any kind of measures, steps to accommodate and reintegrate those refugees, because there are too many numbers. I think around 3 million, 2.7, 2.6 million people. So there is this international facet to the issue. Then yes, the security approach that we are taking, as in, since we are taking care of each and every aspect of the security, and this is also an issue, this is also a loophole which must be taken care of. So for us, it's also an issue of utmost urgency, because there is this problem of hideouts and aiding and abetting of terrorists, and there have been connection to these population
refugee
camps. But I think the will of international community, international organizations like United Nations, and major actor like United States, and then again the most important actor, Afghanistan, is also very important. If that's the triangle is not complete, it would not happen. And at the moment, on ground, speaking from the ground, the people who went back to Afghanistan a few months back, a year back, when the situation was really bad and there was a crisis situation between the two countries, most of them have returned back. And I'm also talking about those people who have established their businesses in Pakistan. They shifted their businesses, and after just in a span of 6 to 7 months, they came back. They followed the procedures, and they're like, we would follow the procedure, though the procedures are really stringent and difficult, but still they are following it, because there are no opportunities for them in Afghanistan. Even though most of the Afghan patients are dependent on the health facilities that are there in both private and government in Peshawar and Islamabad too. So in this situation, an easy repatriation would be difficult. It would take time. It would need both the countries to be prepared for this, because yes, Pakistan wants the refugees to be repatriated back, and with respect as well. I think that's the most important aspect, because we have been hosting them for the last 20-25 years, and at the end of the day, when the time has come that they should leave, that should be in a respectable manner. It's up to our societal norms as well, and this is what it should be, because obviously if you could not capitalize on them when they were staying here and use them as our ambassadors, our resource, that was weakness on our part. We could not, either we should have integrated them or we should have registered them. I think state very late realized that there are these people, around 3 million, who are not Pakistani citizens. They were not registered, their records were not kept. Our state didn't knew where they are living, what is the population assessment, demographic assessment. I think that was a very weak strategy on our part. But if they were there, we should have kind of created a society had created a space, but state didn't. And then this diaspora should have been used as a positive gesture for Pakistan.
Right.
The anti-Pakistan sentiment in Afghanistan would have been countered with this.
Right.
So at this moment of time, I think we cannot afford more anti-Pakistan sentiment with these people. I think state would need to show some restraint, Pakistani state, at the moment.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Some good news as well coming from Washington, D.C., surprisingly. Washington, sir, has reaffirmed that it has no desire to sever its ties with Pakistan or launch any military strikes inside its territory. And this assurance, sir, was given by the Deputy Secretary of State, John Sullivan, not to Pakistani officials, but to the Afghans. And that is very significant, sir. In your opinion, sir, do you see this as a step forward, especially when we see that in the backdrop of the recent attacks in Afghanistan, as we had seen earlier, all fingers would point towards Pakistan. This time the response was muted. Maybe there was some realization that it's not all Pakistan's fault, and that a large area of the Afghan countryside is ungoverned by the Afghan government, and therefore there are a number of sanctuaries within the borders of Afghanistan that are perpetrating these attacks. So do you think that's a positive step, sir?
It certainly is, but then, ever since this policy speech by Donald Trump on 20th of August last year, there has been a very a strong response by Pakistan on several occasions at several levels. And of late, we have heard again from several US officials, both civil and military, meaning almost the same thing as the Deputy Foreign Secretary has just said the other day in Afghanistan, that USA would like to continue a relationship with Pakistan, want to maintain dialogue, share intelligence, and look forward to cooperation, and that there will be no hostile action across the border in Pakistan. But the fact remains that they've had over 450 drone strikes ever since they began, and the last one was not too far back. And that is a hostile act. That is inside Pakistani territory. While they say that they don't want to do that, they're still doing it. Well, they like to stay connected, they like to maintain dialogue, they like to continue to share intelligence, and they like to cooperate, and they want cooperation from Pakistan as well. Very good. But the fact is that they are dependent on Pakistan. They cannot afford to run their war and hope to succeed without Pakistan's cooperation. And Pakistan will cooperate only if it is comfortable in that relationship. We've had a closure of supply routes for over 6-7 months after the Salalah incident. And if ever similar thing happens again, we know what to do. And it will become difficult for the Americans to prosecute their operations any further. Now they are increasing the number of troops. They increased by 3,000 and now another similar figure. And that means their logistic dependence on Pakistan would increase. So it is time that they sought more cooperation from Pakistan. And they have to sound friendly and appear friendly and act friendly. And I think we have heard in last 4 or 5 weeks similar comment, which are welcome. But then
it should be followed by practical action.
It should be followed by practical actions.
Absolutely.
I mean, like if we continue to hear those accusations of safe havens in Pakistan, the Taliban have almost half the country at their disposal. They don't need to travel all the way to Pakistan, hide over here, recuperate or equip or train and plan and go and execute over there. When they can then right over there.
Absolutely.
And whereas, you see, when we accuse the Afghan government or looking the other way when Taliban are hiding over there, TTP I'm talking about, and they plan and control operations from there inside Pakistan, they are not willing to accept that, because we can clearly say, look, we have the entire country in our control. There is no safe haven there, but over there we find that half the country is not under their control. So if that be the case, I mean, their accusations are baseless.
And in the scenario, sir, it makes it even more important and imperative that Pakistan does continue fencing the border with Afghanistan.
Certainly, because you see,
and there are more than one reasons for that.
When they're accusing us of giving them safe havens, that means they're not using helicopters. They go on ground. They don't have tunnels across the border. So if they go on ground and they travel over land and they go on foot, and if you're wanting to fence, that is in good faith. We have to manage the border, because if we are able to fence the entire border, we are able to create thousands or so plus checkposts. We put radars over there to detect human movement, and we are able to prosecute and manage the border. Then they will not be able to make the excuse that people are going across and then doing this.
Well, interestingly, sir, the U.S. Central Command Chief General Joseph Votel also said something very interesting, and I'll quote that he said, "We have had our differences with Pakistan over the years on this, and Pakistan remains absolutely critical to the solution of the problem in Afghanistan." Now, that is a very interesting statement coming from Joseph Votel, sir. Absolutely critical in the solution of the Afghan problem. And having said that, why don't we see some practical steps being taken on the ground to show that this statement is actually made in good faith and it has or carries some weight?
The issue with the American establishment and government is that they are not on the same page. Since Pentagon is involved in these operations and this war for the last many years, they know the ground realities. They know the importance of Pakistan as a state, Pakistan's military, Pakistan's geostrategic location. Since they are not on the same page, and Donald Trump and his associates, they have a different agenda. They have political agenda to score, and since they have promised in their electioneering that they would punish that actor and they would punish this actor. So they are not planning, they are not talking about any idea, and he just tweets it. And afterwards, this is what we have been witnessing for the last 1 year, that the whole US establishment and the government machinery and structures try to sometime do firefighting, sometime manipulate the argument, sometime cover the argument. That's what is going on. Responsible people are making responsible statements like the one that you have shared. Yes, there are always differences. When you have a military alliance, when you are going into tactical operations, you would have differences. Even two generals of the same army would have differences. That's a natural thing. But you cannot come up with extremist stances, and you cannot come up with the stance of humiliating one party or the other. You can discuss those issues, you can come up with another better strategy, but American soldiers, American military knows the importance of Pakistan and its location. That's why they are critical about it. I mean, nobody should talk about keeping Pakistan aside or dehyphenating Pakistan from the Afghan solution, whether on ground, whether on battlefield, or in the political scenario. That's why we see that there is this retrospective thinking in the mindset of people who are there in Pentagon or other important structures of US government, while people in White House are still maybe not convinced, or they do not want to
But
redeem.
if you just notice the kind of sounds that are coming out of the White House in the previous couple of weeks, there seems to be a shift in the paradigm. There seems to be a shift.
Definitely, they would have got briefings. They would have got the details of the kind of association that they had with us. They would have also, for example, our Foreign Office spokesman just last week just revealed one fact, that in November we handed over 27 Haqqani network members to Afghan government. So what was that? How would you see that? I mean, being a mature diplomat or being a mature country, if we are not bringing these to public domains or public discourse, that doesn't mean that you should take advantage of that and start maligning Pakistan. This is one fact. We must have dozens of facts like this where Pakistan has played very important role. So if we are handing over 27 Haqqani network people to Afghanistan, then the whole your argument would die like anything. So this kind of fact finding would have been done. Somebody would have taught them, and somebody would have informed them about the role of Pakistan. That's why there is this change of stance and change of body language.
Yes.
And that's why you see there is this
realization
where they want to somehow do the firefighting that has damaged Pakistan-US relations due to their January 1 tweet.
Right. Okay, let's also talk about the importance of fencing the border when it comes to the use of Afghan territory and soil by India against Pakistan, sir. If we just mention about the event of yesterday, 2 people lost their lives, sir, and a number of them were injured, again as a result of indiscriminate shelling and firing by the Indian troops across the line of control. It has become a constant thorn in our side, sir. And the international community now needs to take cognizance of this fact. What can we do to now highlight this issue more forcefully, sir, on the international fora, that it is Pakistan who is taking, or rather, showing restraint when it comes to the constant violations of the ceasefire of 2003? What should we do, sir?
See, this matter was raised by Pakistan earlier on the UN, where Pakistan had suggested that a special observer group be created for Kashmir. We already have the military observers here, but the Indians have not allowed them over there. I think we need to stress on our proposal and compel the UN, or at least forcefully convince them that there is a serious and a very significant reason, and we must go back with the entire details of the number of people who have died at the hands of the Indian firing and shelling. and convince them that they need to put an observer over here, and they have to ask India to allow the positioning of observers over there. And it will help the Indians also, because they keep on complaining that there is infiltration taking place from Pakistan. If they have their observers over there, please show it to them that there is infiltration happening. And the Indians, because there is no infiltration, so that is why they do not allow these observers.
Right.
I mean, it is strange that Pakistan is allowing, and they are here permanently for the last so many years, and the Indians have not allowed. We need to go back to the UN and ask them and convince them that, look, so many people have died, and they just can't close their eyes to this.
So what does the international law say about this, Salman? When an army, soldiers attacking civilians across the border, and civilian casualties taking place in such high record numbers, isn't there some forum where we can approach, and the International Court of Justice can be approached, because the United Nations really hasn't done much? So what other forums are there for Pakistan to approach?
Absolutely, it's in international law, it's illegal to target civilians across the border and to violate these treaties and understandings between the two countries, because when there is a treaty between the two countries, may it be a bilateral agreement or may it be a multilateral agreement, it becomes part of it, becomes an instrument of international law. And all the humanitarian conventions, the Geneva Protocol and all the international instruments, they are against the violation. International Court of Permanent Court of International Justice could be approached. Voice could be raised in UN General Assembly as well, as we have raised. But the issue is, we should on soft power front, we should also play some important role, because in international community, when you want to mobilize this institution, you need to convince them, you need to create awareness, you need to put your case in front of these international media outlets, these think tanks, and those people who are working on these humanitarian issues. Only then can you kind of advocate your case. Now in this case, Pakistan needs to tell the world that Prime Minister Modi has adopted a very different kind of strategy to win elections in India. He has used anti-Pakistan card as his electioneering slogan, and that's why he kind of always heaten up the LOC. And he has also purchased some media houses in India who 24/7 rant about these cross-border violations, and at times they present it as war. At times they just they present a very futile kind of activity as a surgical strike, which is not qualified as a surgical strike by all means of academics and research. But since it's for the consumption of masses in India, it's for consumption of specific media outlets, and these actions are being taken keeping in view the next elections. So I think that there would be an upsurge in these LOC violations in the coming months, because elections are approaching, and Pakistan needs to take these evidences. Pakistan needs to play some role in international media. Our diaspora must play some role, and they should bring this up wherever they are, at whatever platform they could, because until and unless you create a favorable public opinion at international level for a case, it is very difficult for you to plead that case. And India has been doing good in that sense. They have been camouflaging what they are up to, because there is very little awareness about the intricacies of Indian political system, where BJP has a specific agenda, and BJP foster their agenda by using their Hindutva based extremist policies and by acting in a particular manner with Pakistan. These are the two main parameters of BJP's political whatever it is. So that's the case, and in that case I think Pakistan has been suffering, civilians have been targeted, but the good thing about Pakistan in my opinion is that it has been restraining from taking any kind of action
to escalate.
Because Indians want that, it would favor them. And there is another aspect to the debate as well. India, there are groups in India, there are people in India, there are institutions in India who are spending a hell lot of money in defense business. So now they have to justify 54 to 55 billion dollars of defense expenditure. I have not studied the recent budget. We need to check that as well. What's the current amount of defense expenditure? But somebody needs to justify that, and to justify that military industrial complex, they also take these kind of initiatives, and that's why for the first time in history you would see very close collusion of Indian military and Indian political elite. Generally, Indian political elite have not been paying much attention to what Indian military has been demanding, because Indian military for the last 10-15 years have been asking for upgrades and budget increases and all. But this is for the first time that Indian government is very positive about it, and even the upgrades and even the purchases that military is not interested in, they are also given to them, because there is this huge business going on.
Right. Well, when we talk about the use of Afghan soil, sir, for activities against Pakistan, especially by RAW and Indian agencies, again, when the NDS delegation was here in Pakistan, do you think that would have been brought up by the Pakistani side? And if so, what cooperation can the Afghan government give us in terms of dealing with this particular aspect, which is very worrying for us?
You see, the Afghan government is very friendly with India, and it will be, I think, futile to expect that they would listen and react or support our viewpoint and dissuade themselves from cooperating or collaborating with India on this, because the fact remains that Indians do not have a border with Afghanistan. They should practically have no interest there. The only thing that they can look forward to is a transit route from here to Central Asia going through Pakistan and Afghanistan. But that is not happening. So the only interest that they have is to create another front against Pakistan from the West and pressurize Pakistan. And that is something which even the Americans have acknowledged in one or two write-ups, that the Indians have been indulging into this activity of supporting terrorism in Pakistan from Afghanistan.
Well, we have Kulbhushan to prove it, sir.
Yes.
Well, we'll leave it at that, sir. We're out of time. Thank you very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation, sir. We'll be having it again and again, because we want to bring this point and let that sink in to the rest of the world. So thank you once again. Well, you heard the conversation. And in conclusion, we say that you should draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but the fact of the matter remains that for Pakistan and Afghanistan, cooperation is the only option going forward. And we hope and we pray that the Afghan and Pakistani authorities realize that the only way forward is for us to cooperate. On that note, it's goodbye.